During the 12 years we spent together, from the outside, I could have said our marriage was perfect. And we had 2 children, family dinners every Sunday, and a home that appeared happy. But nothing is as simple as it seems. Some things begin with subtle signs, like whispers in the wind, which at first you don't understand, until those signs become an unavoidable truth. This is my story, the dark journey where I faced my wife's gradually fading love, her increasing distance, and ultimately, a bitter betrayal that came to light. Rachel had always been an organized person. On Mondays, she had Pilates, Wednesdays were for a book club, and Friday nights, after the kids went to bed, we had movie night. But suddenly, this routine began to change. She started going out more frequently, sometimes 2 or 3 nights a week. Her excuses were always ready. I'm meeting the yoga group, or we're going to the gym late. I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But there was something in her eyes, maybe excitement, maybe guilt, whatever it was. It made it hard for me to accept. There's one night I remember particularly well. When she came home from one of those nights out with her friends, it was as if another woman had walked through the door. There was a look of satisfaction on her face, like she had just had the best night of her life. And in that moment, I realized that Rachel was slowly slipping away from me, becoming a stranger in our own home. She barely said anything to me or the kids anymore. At night, when I asked about the time she spent out, she would just say it was fine and brush off the conversation. Then she would head to the bathroom and stay there for hours. I had never seen myself as a detective, but during those times a feeling of unease started to stir within me. And then there was the phone. I don't even know where to start. It was as if the phone was glued to her hand. Even when she was cooking in the kitchen, it would be sitting on the counter, face down, constantly buzzing. That's when I knew something was wrong. One day, she got a message, and her entire demeanor changed. It was like she had been caught red-handed. She deleted the message so fast that I couldn't even make sense of it. "Who was that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice as calm as possible. But she just laughed and said, "Spam message, nothing important," with a tone that was a little too cheerful. I didn't bring it up again that night, but my suspicions were growing deeper. You might wonder why, if I was so suspicious, I didn't confront her right away. But you have to understand, when you've shared your life with someone, it's hard to immediately think the worst. Rachel and I had a history, a good one. We weren't just husband and wife, we were partners, best friends, or so I thought. So, I decided to do everything I could to save our marriage. Maybe we were just going through a phase. Maybe she was stressed because of work. Maybe we were just bored of our routine. I planned a surprise weekend getaway, just the 2 of us. I even spoke to her boss to make sure she could get time off. I rented a cozy little cabin in the mountains, arranged for a babysitter for the kids. I had everything planned, and I was excited to share the news with her. But when I told her about the surprise, I didn't see the happiness or excitement I was expecting. Instead, she looked uncomfortable. "I can't," she said, not even making eye contact. "I have to be at work this weekend. It's really busy." My heart shattered in that moment. It wasn't just her words, but the ease with which she said them. It was like lying had become second nature to her. That night, as I sat in front of the TV, I thought about everything. I replayed every moment of our marriage, trying to figure out when things had started to go wrong. But I couldn't find the answer. All I knew was that the woman I had shared my life with was slipping away, and I had no idea how to bring her back. Over time, the tension between us grew unbearable. Rachel would get defensive at even the smallest questions. If I asked, "When will you be home?" she'd snap back, "Why do you need to control my life?" We started fighting more often, and every time I ended up feeling guilty. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. But not in the way you might think. One evening, as I watched her smile at her phone, I reached my breaking point. And at that moment, I knew I needed help. I needed someone who could tell me the truth. So I reached out to Rachel's best friend, Samantha. Samantha had been a part of our lives since the early days of our marriage. If anyone could help me, it was her. We met at a cafe. I'm sure Samantha could tell I was on edge. After all, what husband sits across from his wife's best friend and says, "I think my wife is cheating on me"? When the words came out of my mouth, I saw the shock in Samantha's eyes, and in that moment I felt a little less crazy. "Daniel, are you sure?" Samantha asked, her eyes full of doubt. "Rachel has always been so devoted to you and the kids. I can't imagine her doing something like that." Her first reaction was denial. Maybe it was her way of defending Rachel, of trying to clear her name. But I started telling her everything. The late nights, the deleted messages, the sudden outbursts of anger. As I laid it all out, Samantha's expression began to change. She bit her lip and leaned in closer, as if I had just shared a terrible secret. "Okay," she said finally. "I don't want to make you paranoid, but yes, I've noticed Rachel has been acting differently, more distant, colder." She stared into her coffee, stirring it as if she could find the answers in the cup. "But if you want to know the truth, we need proof. Real proof." And then Samantha's idea hit me like a ton of bricks, a GPS tracker. That night, we secretly placed a GPS device in Rachel's car, hidden in the glove compartment. Every day, I opened the GPS app on my phone and watched the little red dots tracking Rachel's movements. She was going to work and back. Everything seemed normal. But at night, things started to change. On the map, she would disappear, stop in unfamiliar neighborhoods, and sometimes park at cheap motels for hours. Then one day, the GPS led me to a restaurant we used to frequent. It was a special place for us. Ever since our early days of dating, my heart was pounding as I watched the little red dot on my screen. And eventually, it stopped in the parking lot. I rushed to get there, eager to catch her in the act. But by the time I arrived, her car was gone, as if it had never been there. That night, I called Samantha and told her everything. "I can't take this anymore," I said, my voice trembling. "I know she's hiding something." Samantha encouraged me. "You have to hang in there," she said. "Things will get more complicated before the truth comes out, but you deserve to know what's really going on." Samantha was right. I couldn't confront Rachel. At least not without solid evidence. So I buried myself in the GPS logs, analyzing her every move, searching for patterns. I identified her most frequent stops, visited those places, took photos, and recorded every detail. It was as if I was building a case against my own wife. Finally, my suspicions led me to the truth. That night was the night the truth would knock on my door. That evening, Rachel told me she was going out with her friends again, as usual. I pretended to believe her, but I knew better now. Her eyes could no longer convince me. Once she left, I jumped into my car and started tracking her on the GPS. And that red dot was moving toward a familiar place. Rachel went to a small, dimly lit bar. It wasn't the kind of place she'd go to meet her friends. A few minutes later, I saw her there with another man. Watching them from a distance, it wasn't hard to figure out what was going on between them. They stood close, whispering to each other. At that moment, everything inside me shattered. I thought to myself, this is it. This is the end. I waited for a moment. Rachel and the man left the bar and got into his car. I started following them. They stopped in front of a hotel and went inside together. There was no longer any doubt. Rachel was cheating on me. At that moment, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to follow them inside and end everything right then and there. But I couldn't predict how things would turn out. In the end, without a clear plan in mind, I walked into the hotel. When I found the room, I knocked on the door. Rachel and the man were inside, and they opened the door in shock. The look of fear on Rachel's face as our eyes met said everything. She didn't need to ask, "What are you doing here?" Because in that moment, all the masks had fallen. I simply said, "I came to learn the truth." My mind was racing with 1,000 questions, and tears streamed down my face. I wanted to scream, to shout at her about the unbearable pain of her betrayal, but the words were stuck in my throat. In the end, I turned and walked away without saying anything. When I got home, my mind was in complete turmoil. I didn't know what to do next. But one thing was clear. I had to confront Rachel. When Rachel came home, I was sitting in the living room. She needed to speak. She had to confess everything. But things didn't go the way I expected. Rachel chose to deny everything. "We're just friends," she said. "You're blowing this out of proportion." But there was no reason left for her to stand behind her lies. Angrily, I stood up and told her that I knew everything. "Stop treating me like a fool," I yelled. "I followed you to the hotel. I saw everything with my own eyes." At that moment, Rachel fell silent. But still, she didn't admit the truth. That night, our argument went on for hours. In the end, we had no choice but to decide on a divorce. From that moment, our marriage was completely over. The divorce process was painful. Rachel still denied everything, trying to paint herself as innocent. But the truth was clear. The trail to the hotel, the messages on her phone, and more. In the end, everything came to light. After the divorce, my life didn't recover for a while. I felt as if I had lost my marriage, my life, and my children's future. But over time, I started to pick up the pieces. I knew I had to stay strong for my children. They were everything to me. My relationship with Rachel was completely over. But I would always be there for my kids. When I got home, my mind was in complete turmoil. I didn't know what to do next. But one thing was clear. I had to confront Rachel. When Rachel came home, I was sitting in the living room. She needed to speak. She had to confess everything. But things didn't go the way I expected. Rachel chose to deny everything. "We're just friends," she said. "You're blowing this out of proportion." But there was no reason left for her to stand behind her lies. Angrily, I stood up and told her that I knew everything. "Stop treating me like a fool," I yelled. "I followed you to the hotel. I saw everything with my own eyes." At that moment, Rachel fell silent. But still, she didn't admit the truth. That night, our argument went on for hours. In the end, we had no choice but to decide on a divorce. From that moment, our marriage was completely over. The divorce process was painful. Rachel still denied everything, trying to paint herself as innocent. But the truth was clear. The trail to the hotel, the messages on her phone, and more. In the end, everything came to light. After the divorce, my life didn't recover for a while. I felt as if I had lost my marriage, my life, and my children's future. But over time, I started to pick up the pieces. I knew I had to stay strong for my children. They were everything to me. My relationship with Rachel was completely over, but I would always be there for my kids.